How's it going, guys? Today I want to go over a topic that I hold near and dear to my heart. This is something that I basically struggle with every day, along with a lot of other people in the industry, in the world in general. And today our topic is about imposter syndrome. Okay, so the first thing we should probably address is just what is imposter syndrome. If you guys are in tech, and you guys are engineers, or if you guys are students in computer science, you guys have probably heard this term a lot. I actually didn't hear it until later in my career. I think I actually heard it towards the end of college or the beginning of my actual professional career in the industry. But imposter syndrome is basically a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear as being exposed as a fraud. So what does this mean, right? This is basically the idea that you or whoever is suffering from imposter syndrome never actually allows themselves to internalize their success. And so essentially anytime that this person accomplishes something, anytime that this person does something good, they basically just attribute it to something like luck. It was a mistake. They were in the right place at the right time. They'll do anything, even having good teammates, they'll do anything to basically push the praise off of themselves and never allow themselves to realize their success or their contribution to some sort of successful project or task. And so this is actually pretty dangerous in some ways. It's dangerous because it's kind of just like a vicious cycle, right? You'll get a project, you'll get very overwhelmed at the fact that you feel like you can't do this project or you can't have this job or you're not qualified to be doing what you're doing. You'll somehow scrap together the project is typically what happens. You'll finish it, you'll get it completed, and it'll be fine. Everyone will be happy with it. And then you'll actually take that positive feedback. And again, you'll just kind of deflect it and say, oh, I had great teammates. It wasn't really that hard. If I can do it, anyone can do it. It's that sort of thing. And then once you get another project or you get another job offer or anything like that, you'll just, again, not attribute it to anything that had to do with you. You will never succeed because of something you did. It will always be something that's circumstantial. It'll always be something that has to do with luck. Anything that pushes that responsibility away from you being successful. So now that we've kind of defined imposter syndrome and we've talked about it briefly, let's try and determine if you might have imposter syndrome. And if you do, what can you do to try and resolve it? So I'm just going to ask a couple questions, and if you guys relate to them at all, you have imposter syndrome. I'm just kidding, but honestly, this could be indicative of the fact that you might do some of these things we said, where you're deflecting things that actually have to do with your abilities and you're pushing off praise that you should otherwise accept. So question one is, do you frequently attribute your success to luck? Right? So do you believe that things that you do that are good are simply a result of you being lucky? Question number two is, do you believe that if I can do it, anybody can do it? So again, what you're doing is not special, it's not hard, anyone can do the things that you're doing. And our final question is, do you compare yourself to others and believe that your abilities fall short? So do you constantly feel like your skills don't match up to people that you're working around? Do you constantly feel like you're sort of the underdog? So if you guys have answered yes to any of these questions, that could be indicative that you have imposter syndrome. And that's okay, because that's something that I deal with, that's something that a lot of people deal with, you're not alone. And it's something that's really, I feel like, actually pretty normal in tech. I feel like a lot of people do it. I was recently reading a Reddit post actually that said that I think 58% of employees at places like Facebook, Netflix, Google, Amazon actually believe that they don't really deserve the jobs that they're doing, which is really interesting. But again, it's something that's really like widely spread. I feel like it's something that's very common, and I think it's common just because of how much our space is kind of expanded. It's not really realistic to be a full stack developer in the sense that you know all the frameworks, in the sense that you know all the different languages, in the sense that you know all the different architectures of systems and how to deal with all different kinds of databases, etc., etc. It's not really realistic anymore. I think back in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was a lot more manageable. You can kind of wrap your arms around everything. But nowadays, it's just so expansive. There's too many things. You can't possibly know everything. So again, this is something that I've dealt with in my career. This is something that I think kind of came out of me not feeling like I was a good student in college. I felt like I could never do well on my computer science tests. A lot of the programs I wrote would break and wouldn't really produce the correct results. I found that I was always living in the library, and that whenever I got a project that was due in 2 weeks, I was the kid who was inside the library the day that it got assigned, and then I was the one who was struggling, ironically, to finish it the day that it was due. So I definitely think that that's where my imposter syndrome kind of started, and I think it kind of progressed and followed me outside of college. Even when I got offers from companies and I would start jobs, I felt like there was just this inevitability where like there'd be a day where I'd come in the office and they would just finally realize that I was some fraud and they had hired the wrong person and that I actually wasn't capable of doing my job. And none of that has ever happened. It's just something that's really been in my head, but nonetheless it still kind of irks you and it kind of follows you around. But there are definitely ways that you can deal with imposter syndrome. So today I want to just share a few tips of how I like to try and deal with imposter syndrome in ways that I try and mitigate the effects that it has on me. So to deal with imposter syndrome, I actually want to talk about the 3 questions that I asked at the beginning of the video and kind of just address how we can deal with our yes responses to those questions. So the first question was, do you frequently attribute your success to luck? And I like to think and remind myself, because sometimes I forget, that what you do in life typically isn't luck. A lot of times, especially in programming, people fall into 3 camps, right? So in programming, I'm thinking you probably did one of 3 things to actually get to where you are today if you're an engineer in the real world. 1, you went to college. You probably went and got a degree from a 4-year university, actually studied computer science and learned those skills throughout the 4 years, working really hard, spending time in the library, completing crazy, weird projects that you probably don't use anymore. And you got your degree and you learned those skills and you worked really hard in those 4 years. The second type of people, the second camp that we're going to talk about, is people who go to boot camps. And I feel like that's super common nowadays. A lot of people will actually switch to the job that they're doing, take about 10 weeks, 12 weeks, go to a coding boot camp, and come out as an engineer getting offers for 6 figures. And so that's amazing. That has nothing to do with luck. That is someone who's taking a big risk, quitting his or her job, taking 10 weeks of an expensive program and trying to really do, a total 180-degree turn potentially in their career. And that's not lucky, right? They're working at that boot camp from 9 to 5, 9 to 9. They're working a lot. They're working really hard to learn the skills that they need to succeed as an engineer. That's not luck. That's hard work. And then potentially the third camp, which I think might even be the most impressive, is just people who are entirely self-taught. People who don't have a computer science degree. People who haven't gone to a boot camp. Someone who just said, I like programming, I'm going to pick up a book and learn it. Or someone who said, I'm really interested in Java and just starts writing programs in Java and struggling through all the different types of code that they might have to learn. Again, those 3 camps, computer science degree, boot camps, self-taught engineers, that's not luck, that's hard work. So the second question I asked was, do you believe that if you can do it, anyone can do it? And I think a really easy way to say no to that and to kind of reject the yes that you're tempted to say is just reflect on your work and celebrate the success and the achievements that you reach. So anytime that you kind of complete a project, especially in engineering, it's pretty easy to actually tell how much of that project you contributed to, right? So if you guys have something like version control, whether it's GitHub or something else, you guys can actually go in and look, chances are, how many lines of code you committed to that feature or to that project to make it come to fruition, right? To actually ship it to production. You guys can very closely track how much of that project you're responsible for. The next thing that I like to think about too in this kind of vein is just how many different skills did you actually need to ship that code? How many different languages did you need to know? How many different factoids and things about different languages and just skills and architectural patterns, and the list goes on and on, but how many different things did you actually need to bring that project from start to finish? Chances are it's a lot, so I think it's helpful to remind yourself of that. The third thing that's really easy and potentially even tangible is just how much value is that project that you just finished bringing to the company? How much value is it bringing to the users, right? You might actually be able to measure it, right? Maybe your feature or your product, your redesign, whatever it may be, maybe it increased your company's conversion rates by upwards of 7%, right? Maybe your project reduced the time that it takes to query the database by 10 seconds. Maybe some feature that you just shipped actually just increased the monthly active users on your application by 10%. Maybe the feature that you just shipped increased the average user time from 10 seconds to 20 seconds per session. So the third question I asked was, do you compare yourself to others and believe that your abilities fall short? And so I think a really easy way to combat this one is just realize that software engineering is really hard. And there's no way that you're going to know everything in this field. This field is way too big. It's expanding way too fast. There's way too many different segments of this field for you guys to know everything. And that's okay, and that doesn't make you an imposter. It's not realistic. It's impossible to actually know everything in this field, let alone other fields as well. And so the way that I actually remind myself of this fact and remind myself that I'm not an imposter on a daily basis is I actually just look at something that I have in my room, and I'm going to show that to you guys now. So this is something that hangs in my room and that I look at on a daily basis multiple times a day. But this is a brochure from Mac from 1983, and I thought it was super cool. I really wanted to get it when I saw it. And it says, of the 235 million people in America, only a fraction can use a computer. And so this means two things to me. First thing that it means is just the fact that what we do is not easy, right? Only a fraction can use a computer. That's crazy. Guys, the stuff that we do, the reason why we get paid so much is because what we do is hard. And it's not easy, and not everyone can do it. And the second thing that this reminds me of, guys, is how ingrained tech is in our culture, in our actual lives nowadays. It's crazy. Everything is about technology. We really are helping society, I like to think, and we really are advancing society in ways that weren't really possible before computers. Okay guys, if you guys enjoyed that video, do me a favor, leave it a like and subscribe to the channel for more, and I'll see you guys next time.